Hey everyone, it's Patch 3.24 in Necropolis, and today I want to make a very quick video talking about all the new technology that we found out over the first few days of playing this build. I hope everyone's been having an amazing time with the build. I hope everyone's been having an easy time progressing through all the campaign and getting all the way to red maps. I know a lot of people have been playing this build and everyone's been having a wonderful time with it. A few people have been struggling here and there with a few things, but nothing that wasn't very easy to fix or get sorted out very quickly for people to just be able to just have a super easy time with this. So far, all I've seen in terms of feedback from people is that build super tanky, build's easy to get going, a little bit of a lower boss DPS than expected, especially pre-anathema, which would just double your damage. But hopefully today we can talk about some of the things that you could do to get a lot of additional damage for basically no losses at all. So the first thing we should talk about is Ephemeral Edge. What could possibly be better than the weapon that our whole build is scaled around? Well, what if I told you two of them is just better? So that is right. We want to potentially consider dual wielding Ephemeral Edges. Now, the reason for this being is that Ephemeral Edge itself has really good stats. Now, you might be asking yourself, Allie, doesn't that mean we would become squishier because we would lose our energy shield, which has a lot of our energy shield on it? And the answer is no. You actually wouldn't, because Ephemeral Edge has up to 50% increased maximum energy shield on it, which is the whole reason this actually works. For example, on screen here, this is the shield that I used up until today. This was an okay shield with decent resistances on it and decent stats. And for the most part, I was pretty happy with the shield, and I don't really think I needed anything better than this. Well, what we end up looking at was that if we just simply equipped a second Ephemeral Edge, it basically gives me as much energy shield as the shield does. And by us dual wielding, not only do we benefit from the 40% increased global accuracy rating on the Ephemeral Edge itself, but we also get to benefit from the hidden modifier that dual wielding gains. If you dual wield in Path of Exile, you actually gain 10% more attack speed, which just means you are going to not only have a substantially comfier clear, going from about 2.8 APS all the way up to 3.1 APS, making it feel smoother to play, but because you're getting all of your ES back, in some cases even more depending on how bad your shield was, this means you have a substantially comfier setup that's going to feel better for clear and potentially could be tankier. Now, the one downside of doing this is that obviously if you needed your shield for resistances, you aren't going to be able to use your shield for resistances anymore, meaning you're going to have to figure out how to get those resistances in other places, which may or may not be difficult to do based on how much money you have currently and where you are in your build. But this is something I would personally check for yourself in Path of Building by just simply importing your character and simply just looking at how much DPS equipping a second Ephemeral Edge in your offhand would actually give you. In most people's cases, because you're not going to have a good shield, this should be a pretty big DPS increase. Now, the one thing to mention about this change to dual wielding is obviously we can't shield charge anymore. That's going to be completely fine because due to the amount of attack speed we're going to have, Whirling Blades is actually going to feel very comfortable to play. Whirling Blades is basically just as good as shield charges in my opinion, while at the same time feeling snappier and better to play because Whirling Blades kind of goes around corners and doesn't have some of the jankiness a shield charge does. You're not going to be able to run momentum with this, but you're still going to be able to run faster attacks, make it feel pretty much just as good as shield charge. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is going to be just a way to get 20% free DPS. This is something I didn't really consider, as this is something you typically only do in spells, and I never really thought about this in an attack build, but we could simply just add Smite into our build, which is going to give us a lot of added laning damage. And because that added laning damage is an aura, it benefits from all the aura effect that we have from passives such as Charisma and Influence. Smite, when used, simply gives us a 4-second long buff that gives us a lot of added laning damage. Now, what we could do, because we have so many open gem sockets in this build, is we can then pair it with an increased duration, meaning that our Smite is just going to last 6 seconds, and it should be somewhere around a 20% DPS increase, meaning that you're going to do substantially more damage on bosses, and because you only have to press about every 6 seconds, which is about the rate at which you're going to want to press Totem, just due to monsters most likely moving away from it every few seconds, it shouldn't really feel that annoying to do. And in my opinion, you should not need this outside of anything but bosses, meaning it's not going to really add too much additional clunkiness to build while adding a lot of additional DPS. Now, the next thing to talk about is going to be a small passive tree change that's going to be making a big difference. Normally, we've been running the 500 accuracy rating mastery that makes us lose 2 accuracy rating per level. This means at level 100, this is only worth 300 accuracy rating. Well, in this build, we are going to have quite a lot of intelligence. Currently in my setup, I have 561, and realistically in an endgame setup, we're going to have anywhere between 800 to 1,000 intelligence. This means that instead of running the 500 flat accuracy rating mastery, we can instead swap over to the gain accuracy rating equal to your intelligence mastery instead, which in most people's cases is going to be more accuracy rating than the normal accuracy rating mastery is actually giving you. And this is only going to get better and better per level and as you get better gear versus the other accuracy rating mastery that's only going to get worse. Finally, and this is something that I didn't want to include in the early game game setup, as I didn't know how expensive it's going to be, is going to be potentially adding in a Watcher's Eye. Now, there's going to be two specific mods we want to look for, and that's going to be increased damage while affected by Wrath and the increased attack damage while affected by Precision. These two mods are basically as good as each other, and they have the same exact rules. And the reason we want these is because we have a lot of flat damage in our build. Currently, I'm hitting anywhere between 2,000 to almost 300,000 damage. And because we don't have much percent damage, getting even a little bit of percent damage is going to give us quite a lot of DPS. Now, because percent damage is typically shunned by the community and typically considered a bad roll, these mods are typically going to be very cheap in comparison. But in our case, because we need percent damage, we're going to be able to get anywhere between a 8% all the way up to potentially an 11% DPS increase for somewhere around 30 to 50 chaos, depending on how cheap this is. Now, obviously, after this video goes live, these rolls are going to cost a little bit more than before. But my opinion, when you're doing T16 maps and the money is starting to flow in, this jewel makes for a very good value proposition in terms of a really cheap upgrade that's going to be very effective. With all this put together, you should have a substantially easier time while mapping, and between the Smite and the dual wielding changes, that should give you quite a lot of additional boss damage, especially if you are having a few issues in white and yellow maps. If you were to combine everything we mentioned here today, you can gain up to 40% additional damage, with pretty much the only thing that costs any money with all these changes outside of a 2C ephemeral edge is going to be potentially getting the Watcher's Eye. But even if you ignore the Watcher's Eye, you should still be gaining somewhere around a 30% DPS increase, which should feel very comfy and it should be very noticeable immediately. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment in the comments below and I'll be more than happy to help you as soon as I can, or feel free to come by my Twitch. I stream every single day and I've been having so much fun talking about this build and helping people as much as I can with their builds. If you have any questions, just feel free to come by and ask me there. If you simply just want to come and be a part of a community, I'd be more than happy to see you there as well. And with all that said, I hope you kitties have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you all in the next video.